Welcome to Code with Jason Meetup. Today we're going to talk about jobs and the job market and all that stuff. And this was your idea, right, Puneeth? You had brought this up in our last session, recent session sometime. And I said, hey,
Yes,
that's a big, yeah,
yes, correct. Yes.
yeah. And I said, that's a big can of worms. Let's dedicate a whole meeting to it. So here we are. Um, and before we dive in, Puneeth, is there anything specific you wanted to talk about?
No, Jason, I think you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a really interesting conversation on my podcast the other day. It was last Friday as we speak. I had Neeraj Singh, a guy named Neeraj Singh, who is the CEO of Big Binary. If you guys happen to have heard of Big Binary, it's a big consultancy in India. I think they have like 150 devs, Neeraj told me. Anyway, we talked about a whole bunch of stuff, including the economy. Um, and I had kind of a hypothesis, and I think Neeraj seemed to agree with me. I had a hypothesis that the bar now is higher for like getting hired as a developer. And what I had brought up was like, um, was the economy going back, thousands of years or even longer. Um, if you go back to like hunter-gatherer times, the bar wasn't very high to be a productive participant in the economy. But then if you fast forward to like an agrarian economy, it's a little bit harder. Um, Farming is maybe more it demands more skill than hunter gathering. I'm not sure that's true. Maybe that's true. But anyway, if you fast forward to the Industrial Revolution, then definitely that becomes true. Not everybody can be an engineer, for example. Being an engineer takes a lot more skill than just being a regular farmer. Um, and then if you go to like the year 2000, let's say, web applications were a bit simpler back then. Um, you could just put up a single PHP file on a web server, and that could be your web service. And it's not that things have just gotten overcomplicated for no reason between then and now. It's that people didn't have, consumers didn't have as high of expectations of web services. We didn't have anything like Uber or Airbnb, or like Uber is a better example of something that has to have like really high availability. It's very sophisticated infrastructure, all that stuff. Um, And so now, like between 2000 and now, almost 25 years later, um, web services have gotten a lot more complex. Um, and so it's harder, I think. I could be wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. I think today it's harder to be an engineer than it was in the year 2000. And the bar for being able to say, I'm a professional engineer and you should hire me, I think that bar has raised. And so I'll start there. I'm just curious if you guys have any thoughts on that topic.
Yes, Jason. I think mostly it's because of the AI tools that are available now.
You think so?
Maybe, sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. So you think one of the factors is the AI tools and such?
Yes, nowadays, like since due to availability of the Chat GPT and other AI tools, like most basic stuff are like made very easy, and like people are like developers are expected to think above than that. Like it has become like easy for even a mediocre developer can even like ask ChatGPT and like make some contributions.
Hmm.
Maybe due to the availability of AI tools and the recent technologies, I think the expectations are like going higher for from a developer. I think so.
Interesting. Yeah, the AI thing is interesting because I think it has multiple different effects. Um, One effect it certainly has is that for people who maybe aren't professional developers, it kind of lowers the bar. Like things where before you might have needed to hire a developer, now you can do that yourself. Like if you need some one-off script written or something like that, if you want to write a database query or something like that, you don't really have to be a developer in order to write an SQL query anymore. And so there's that effect, but then there's a different effect too, which is I've said this before, how I think I don't know exactly what the formula is. Uh Maybe so it's like the more skilled you are, the more AI helps you, and the less skilled you are, the less it helps you. And if you really don't know what you're doing, AI will actually make you worse. It'll help you create a bigger mess than you could have without AI. So that's,
Correct, Jason.
yeah.
That is true.
Yeah. And it also occurred to me that AI, the effects of AI don't even have to be real in order to have an effect. Because managers could say, well, now that we have AI, I think my developers are going to be a lot more productive. And so we can let some people go. And then they let some people go based on that belief. The belief doesn't even have to be true in order for it to have an effect. And I suspect that that is happening to some degree too. Yeah. And so, Puneeth, was there a specific reason you were interested in this particular topic of the job market and stuff like that?
Yes, Jason. Basically, like I have completed near 2 years of experience now.
Okay.
So I was just looking for a job and I felt it really hard.
Uh-huh.
So and even like some of my friends like it takes like around 6 months to get a job. Like it's really hard getting hard. So I just wanted to like check with you like how do you approach and how are you like making sure that if you are like giving a chance like you are getting it converted. So I just wanted to like check on this, Jason.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. Um, 6 months doesn't surprise me. I've heard people looking for a job for even a year or more, and even people with 10, 15, 20 years of experience having a really hard time getting a job. And again, I don't know if this is a temporary condition. It might just be a permanent condition. By the way, I think maybe that thing Elon Musk did where he fired like three-fourths of Twitter and nothing bad happened to the platform. Um, I think that might have had an effect as well, where it showed people like, hey, we have a lot of waste actually, and we can trim the fat and not suffer any negative consequences from it. And there's also the flip side of that. You can not only let people go and nothing bad happens, but it also means you don't need to hire any new people. So I suspect that might be a factor also. Um, and so it's like there's too many developers chasing too few jobs, and it is a zero-sum game. If it's really the case that there are more developers than there are jobs, and that's kind of a permanent situation, then that's a zero-sum game, and you have to compete with everybody else and win somehow. Um, you said you have like 2 years of experience, Puneeth, is that right?
Yes, Jason.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a little tough because obviously you're competing with people with 10 or 20 years of experience.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Um, and I'll say, uh, you know, I'm I'm not afraid to say things that are like unpleasant truths. Um, it might just be hopeless. There might be a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there who have just stopped looking for a job and they've just left the industry entirely. I don't want to believe that for you, but I want to lay that out as something that's not impossible. Um, but let's suppose it's not hopeless. You have to somehow outcompete everybody else, and how do you do that? I'm not sure, but I can tell you how I've approached this, and we've talked about this a little bit in our last meeting. Um, I've been programming as a hobbyist since the 90s and then professionally since 2005. So a long time is now it's 2024. Um, and recently I've had a really hard time getting a job. By recently, I mean like 2023 is one of my recent job search rounds. I interviewed at 20 different places and I only got one job offer. And then later I went on another round of interviews and I just totally struck out. I only interviewed at four places that time. But after I struck out really hard at four different places, I'm just like, fuck this. I'm not going to play this game anymore because it seems to be a losing game for me. And that's when I decided to go out on my own. So here's how I look at that. There's this whole existing system in place. Um, Organizations make job postings and developers see those job postings and they apply. These days, job postings get hundreds or maybe over 1,000 applications. So right off the bat, the odds are really bad. And then you have to go through these gatekeepers. And me, I've always sucked at going through these gatekeepers. Especially at the bigger companies where the gatekeepers uh aren't weirdos like me. They're like HR people and we're not cut from the same cloth and we don't jive. And there's like a it's kind of a performance, you know, and I've never been good at giving the performance. Um and so I said, okay, this system that exists of applying for the job and then jumping through the hoops and getting past the gatekeepers and stuff like that. I personally suck at that. I don't think I'm ever going to get better at that for certain reasons. Um, so I'm not going to play that game anymore. I'm going to try to get in through a different route. And I decided that instead of going through the front door and going through the normal gatekeepers, I was going to try to go in through the side door. And so I decided to try to use my network and these things that I've built up over the years, like my YouTube channel and my podcast and all that stuff. I decided to see if I can get some work that way. And that's what I did. And that so far has worked. I'm like a year or so into that, and that has worked out quite well, actually. I'm doing better than I would be at a job. And so that path isn't going to be for everybody, but that's the path that I took. I'll pause there in case either of you guys have any comments.
Yeah, I think you can continue this. What I think is it is quite riskier, but as you say, it is not for everyone.
You said you think it's risky?
Yes.
Well, you don't get to have a choice to not have risk. It's just what kind of risk do you want? And for me, I actually think having a full-time job is the most risky. Because then all it takes is one person's decision to turn off your income.
Hmm.
Um, and I've had that happen. And I've had it happen multiple times to the point where it became clear to me that it was risky. So now, the worst position to be in is when you have worked for one place for a long time and you're 100% dependent on that one specific organization for your income. And really, you're dependent on specifically your boss, the person who has the power to fire you. Um, that's like the weakest link in the chain. Because if that link breaks and your boss says we don't need you anymore, then the whole thing's over. Um, so if you become dependent on that and you have not been out in the world selling and marketing yourself, like you don't have a network and you don't have a public presence and stuff like that, then if your boss says we don't need you anymore, then you're going to be screwed. Um,
Correct.
but for me, again, I have my podcast and YouTube channel, blog posts, my book, all this stuff, speaking at conferences, attending conferences. I got all this stuff going where if one of my clients says we don't need you anymore, it's not necessarily a huge deal because I'm out there selling and marketing myself all the time. And so I can go and get something new. So your security comes not from whatever your current income is, but from your ability to get new income.
Mm, correct. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So I don't
Can
know if
I?
this is, yeah, go
So,
ahead.
yeah, if I can add something, like so, Puneet, I've been in the IT sector for nearly 27 years, and around something like 20, 22, 23 years ago, beginning of my career
Hmm.
Mm,
was when the dot-com boom went bust. And then
mm,
closely followed by that was, what we call the mobile spectrum boom going bust as well, because, there were huge auctions, like for licenses on the 3G spectrum, like it. So basically, the spectrum was so overpriced, and telecom companies were laden with debt, so I've been software for telecoms, that type of thing, so yeah. Um, uh,
mm,
uh, Total crunch in the job market, so I had to literally move from sort of the west coast of England to the East Coast, literally. But it's not that big as something in the States, but still, sort of 4 hour drive, that type of thing. But
mm,
I think what helped me at that time was a slightly different perspective, because I stopped looking for certainty. That is, I stopped looking for what we call permanent jobs, as in,
mm,
you are on a contract, still you're on a contract, but it takes 3 months notice to sack you, that type of thing, like. But I went for what they call rolling contract. So basically, they can get rid of you with 1 month's contract, so it will be different for for the job market that you are active in. But
mm,
yeah, if you're especially, if you're trying to make that transition,
mm,
yeah, sometimes take, because what Jason was suggesting was a huge leap, like in terms of starting your own agency, starting working for yourself, that type of thing, like. So uh, take smaller steps, that's what I would say,
correct,
yeah.
correct. But what I feel is like
Mm.
it is not for everybody. Like
Yeah,
if
I agree.
everyone does podcast, if everyone does agency, like there will be like you know not much uh, you got it right. It is not for everyone. Like, so I just thought like
Yeah.
as a developer, like how we can like upskill ourselves in a way such that like uh, we will meet the industry standards and also we will outperform other candidates. Like you are understanding me, right? Like contributing
Yeah.
to open source, like or if we like contribute, for example, if we like contribute to open source, and we will be like ahead of other developers because they might not have like contributed the way we have done, and they might not have the in-depth knowledge the way we might have acquired. So in that perspective, like if we are not like going with any podcast or like starting an agency, and if we really want to continue in this line, like how we can approach Sanjay.
Um, well, I want to comment on something. Um,
Hmm. Yes.
um, Starting your own freelance business or whatever you want to call it, and
Hmm.
having a full-time job,
Hmm.
to me, those aren't two discrete things. They're points on a continuous spectrum. So you can have a full-time job, or you can
Hmm.
have like a full-time contract job. There's freelancers who have a full-time contract for years at a time. It's basically just a job. Or there's freelancers who, like, I don't know, think about like a wedding photographer or something like that. They work for like one day at a time. That's kind of at the extreme end of the spectrum. But there are points all along the spectrum depending on your appetite for risk and change and all that stuff. So I don't want to let people think that it's a binary thing, like you either have a full-time job or you go out on your own. It's
Hmm.
like you can be anywhere along that spectrum that you want to. And even if all you ever want is full-time jobs, um, that doesn't mean that you can't do these. That doesn't mean that you can't always be selling and marketing yourself. And and indeed, I think it greatly benefits people, of course, to constantly be selling and marketing yourself. I've had my podcast and all this other stuff I've mentioned. I've had that in parallel to full-time
Hmm.
jobs throughout my career. And certainly that has helped me. Like if the job ends, then it makes it easier to get the next thing. But I think you were maybe trying to ask a question, but I didn't catch what it was.
Uh, my question was basically, Jason, like if we are not interested in podcast or agency or freelancing, basically. So if we are like interested in only getting a job and getting paid, so how would we like outperform other developers and we'll ensure that we'll get the job? Like, how can we do that?
Yeah, good question. Um, First of all, I'll say that I don't have all the answers.
Hmm.
Um, as I mentioned before, I'm like not somebody who's all that good at going through the mainstream system. So I'd feel a little
Hmm.
disingenuous giving advice about that. I can only share what has worked for me. Um, but it just like logically stands to reason that a lot of the same stuff that has worked for me would work for somebody in a full-time job. So the only thing
Correct.
that matters is like your perceived value. Like if you're in a conversation, it doesn't matter with whether it's a conversation with a prospective freelance client or a prospective full-time employer. The thing that matters is how they perceive you. You could be the best developer in the world, but if they don't see that, then you're not gonna make it. Um,
Correct.
which is like what happened to me. I think I'm a pretty good
Yes.
developer, but like the people interviewing me didn't see that for whatever reasons, and I didn't make it.
Hmm.
And I guess sometimes the answer is, what does that mean? What does that mean? It's like it just wasn't a good match in my case.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know what that's going to mean for other people, but that was at least the case for me. Um, but you said, what if you're not interested in podcasting and all that stuff? It's kind of like, I don't know. I want to find a girlfriend, but I'm not that interested in like lifting weights and working out and like dressing nice and stuff like that. It's like, well, you don't have to
Hmm.
be, but like good luck out there, you know? That's just like what it takes. So obviously like podcasting specifically, you don't have to do that specifically, but like if you want to get the same results, you have to do some of the same stuff. and there's kind of a menu of options you can choose from. Again, it's all about selling and marketing yourself. And let me ask this of you guys. Let's talk about what is sales and what is marketing. Let's start with marketing. What is marketing?
Marketing is basically introducing the product to the customers. Not necessarily it needs to be like sold out, but they should be like aware of what exactly the product is and uh, the advantages or the usages of it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you put that well. It's basically letting people know you exist.
Hmm.
And then what about sales? What is that?
I'm not sure on that. Actually.
Sometimes it's tough to define such common words like this, but I think it's helpful.
So again, sales is converting your marketing activity into revenue.
Hmm. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, I don't have like an off the top of my head definition of marketing, but the way I've just defined sales in the past is helping people buy what they want to buy. I don't know if that exactly hits the nail on the head, but that's one way to think about it at least. Um, and part of, like if you go to a car dealership, the worst car salesmen are just like you go there and they just like tell you all these things that you don't care about these different cars. But a better salesman will ask you like, "Hey, what kind of car are you looking for? Like, what's your deal? Tell me about yourself. How can I help you get what you want?" Um, so that's when I think about sales for my own purposes, that's what I think about, like talking with somebody about their needs, finding out what they want, and helping them decide whether it makes sense for us to work together. And both these things apply again both to consulting and to full-time jobs. Um, and yet again, I like have never been good at the sales part of full-time jobs because I have to plug into this existing sales process that is kind of this weird performative thing that like doesn't really I personally just don't fit with it. Um, but the marketing part, um, there's again this menu of options. But instead of me listing those things out, can you imagine, Puneeth, some ways that you could market yourself as a developer?
Uh, Maybe I can like count on my experience and previous projects that I have like worked on. And apart from that, I'm not sure.
Hmm. Okay, let's maybe think about this a slightly different way. So sales and marketing has a lot in common with dating, and I make dating analogies a lot when I'm talking about this stuff. So like uh you're in a different part of the world, so I don't know if we know the same celebrities, but like who's some celebrity where like if you ask some group of girls like what guy would you want to marry or something like that? What's your celebrity crush or something like that? Can you think of somebody who they would say?
Yeah, Virat Kohli.
What's that?
Virat Kohli. He is a cricket player.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I'm not surprised that it's an athlete. Um, and
Yes.
so why did that name come to mind for you instead of somebody else? Like, okay, why would that name come up instead of Puneeth Kumar? Like, how come?
Uh, uh, the first reason is he is famous. He is known by everyone almost. Uh,
Exactly.
yes, and yeah, and he uh, He's a good player and he's having a good physique.
Hmm.
And yeah, so maybe and also yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think maybe the biggest things is he has a combination of being well known and being high status. Um, and it's like the funny thing is, like, looks isn't even like the biggest part of the thing. Like, there's plenty of guys who like aren't they're maybe just average looking, but if they're well known and high status, then they're in very high demand in the dating marketplace. Um, and so the same thing is true with job opportunities. Like, oh, I'm trying to think of like somebody famous who's like, I don't know, in the tech industry or something like that, who might be analogous to that. Or I'll use a different example, like music industry. So we used a dating analogy. Let's go to economics now. Like, you guys know the show South Park, right? Or maybe not. Okay, well
I'm not that into music, just
okay. Well, there's this show called South Park, which is huge in the US. Um, and they have a theme song. And who did they get to write the theme song? They didn't just grab some random musician. They probably didn't even they probably didn't even have like a pool of candidates or something like that and have them audition or interview or something like that. It seems to me they just picked somebody. They picked Les Claypool from Primus, which is again in the US a really well-known band. Um, because they kind of already had evidence that it was going to go well. They knew about this musician, they were familiar with his body of work, and they said, "We want this to be a good bet, so we're going to bet on this guy who A, we already know about, and B, has a good track record." Um, so in the job market, my stuff, my like minor celebrity status in the Ruby community has actually helped me surprisingly little in the traditional job market. But when it did, it helped a lot. I mentioned that I interviewed at 20 places and I only got one offer. That one offer was quite a good offer. And I know for an absolute fact that the reason I got that offer and at the level that it was and all that stuff was because of the status that I had built in the Ruby community. And so with these things in mind, Puneeth, with this cricket player, with this musician who got picked to write this theme song and stuff like that, and the stuff I've mentioned, what are some things that you might be able to do, Puneeth, to market yourself and gain this, like the cricket player, the knowability and the status? What do you think you could do to develop those two things?
um, maybe we can contribute to open source projects,
Okay.
some good projects which are like uh, quite considerable. Then
Okay.
and
What
then
else?
maybe like learning DSA well and getting into big tech companies.
Sorry, say that one again.
Yeah, learning DSA well, data structures and algorithms, and getting into big tech companies might be.
Learning data structures and algorithms. That might be good, but I don't think that's marketing. Do you understand why I think that's not marketing?
Mm, no, just
Well, again, what is marketing? Let's go back to what you said a minute ago. What is marketing?
it's about like explaining what we can offer, and yeah.
and letting people know you exist. And
Mm.
the data structures and algorithms stuff, just learning that on its own, that doesn't do anything to let people know about it, you know?
No, no, I meant like learning that and getting into big tech companies. Like we have this FANG company. So
Okay. Maybe I'm not quite understanding that one.
Oh,
Um,
what he was saying was FANG, as in Facebook, Amazon, that short form,
right.
Facebook, Amazon, Alpha, Google, yeah, Netflix, Google, so that is, yeah, I think that's what Puneet was
hmm
saying. Yeah.
I get that
yeah,
part.
Yeah.
I just wasn't quite getting how that was connected to marketing. Like if you get a job at one of those places, that's like not the same thing as marketing to me.
Maybe having a GitHub profile, where you publish your code, that could be considered marketing, isn't it? Because you can
Definitely.
show proof that, okay, this is what I have done.
Yeah. Um, and Puneeth, given the couple examples I've given, like this YouTube channel, my podcast, my blogs, those are obviously a few examples. Can you extrapolate from there and think of some other things that could be done to market oneself as a developer?
mm,
I'll ask a
I'm
different
not
way.
sure. Yeah.
Are there some developers you know of, like some well-known developers who you've come across in
Mhm.
your work? Can you think of any names?
Yeah, I know a few. Harkirat Singh. He's a monster developer, so I know him. But he is into yeah. He was previously working in some big tech giant companies, but
Okay.
lately he got into freelance and then he started teaching the students.
Okay.
So that is how I know him. Yes,
Okay. What's the guy's name?
Harkirat Singh.
Okay. I don't know if I can pronounce the name, but this
Yeah.
guy,
Hmm.
um, um, tell me again, how exactly do you know about him?
Yeah, he started, teaching to the students on the Mon stack. So that is how like I came to know it about
Okay,
him.
he was teaching about the Mern stack. Okay.
Yes.
And what mediums was he using for that? Like,
For that he was using online tool. Yeah.
okay, was he teaching like through YouTube, through blog posts?
Yeah, he was having some separate website for that. So through that he used to teach through the Zoom meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that's kind of similar, it sounds like, to my YouTube channel.
Mm,
Um,
correct.
there's the message and the medium.
Mm,
Um, an easy message to get known as a developer is educational content, and that's what a lot of my stuff is. Frankly, it's like somewhat educational, somewhat entertainment. Like I'm not trying to be 100% educational. I'm certainly not trying to be very formal and serious and stuff like that. But education is an easy way to get known because education is in demand. Um, anyway, that's one message, and then one medium, as we're talking about, is video. Um, what other mediums can you think of? We mentioned video, podcasting, blogging, anything else you can think of?
mm, not sure this.
Sanji, what about you? Can you think of some other mediums one could use?
Well, the name Medium itself, sort of writing articles on medium.com,
Mm,
because
hmm
sometimes when you're a beginner, like what keeps you stuck is there are lots of people out there who know more than you. but
Hmm.
always there is somebody who knows less than you. So
Yes.
put it out there, the little bit that we know is a very good way to start, so Puneet, you know about the medium.com, that's a platform for writing,
Yes,
like
yes, yes.
Substack. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
or even, putting out, Twitter posts, about things, those are ways to raise your profile,
Hmm.
I think.
Got it.
Yeah. Yep, definitely that. Can you think of any other Sanjeev?
Mm, no, but taking it to maybe having your own website, your resume or CV posted there.
Hmm.
I did the bit that you mentioned, having your own YouTube channel. That is another area. Yeah, those are the things that I can think about.
Yeah. What about meat space? Maybe that's not a term that's universal. Meat space, also known as real life.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking about conferences and meetups and stuff like that. Does that stir up any thoughts for you guys? Puneeth, does that give any thoughts?
Yes, yes. We can get exposure and also we can get some networks when we attend the meetups, technical meetups, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, and remind me where exactly you're located, Puneeth?
in Bangalore.
Oh,
Just
Bangalore. Okay, so
yeah.
great place to be located for that stuff.
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah, obviously there's plenty of, I mean, I'm assuming there's a ton of meetups and conferences and stuff happening in Bangalore.
Yes, yes, correct. Yes. There are lots of events happening. Thing
Hmm.
is, it is very hard to choose whether should will that be helpful for me or not, because what I see is Ruby Rails meetups are very less. There's one organization as I remember, and it once in a month or twice in a month they meet up. But if we see other events, there would be like events on the blockchain, there would be events on the serverless architecture, and there would be events on some other technology. So it is it would be there are too many things going on and we do not know which one would be helpful for us. So anyway, that's also one way of reaching out to the people and getting a good network, Jason.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it might be easy to get hung up on which is the best and stuff like that. Um, the way I view it, there is no best. You just pick what you want. Like I want to be in the Ruby community. Is it the best community to be in? I don't know, but it's the one that I want to be in. Um, and I think you were saying that there are relatively fewer Ruby related events in Bangalore than other technologies. Did I understand that right?
Yes, Jason.
Yeah.
As I am always. Yeah.
But I think there's something to be said for being a big fish in a small pond rather than a small fish in a big pond. In communities that are small, it's much easier to get well known.
Hmm. Correct, Jason. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's multiple ways to participate in these. Um, you can go to the meetup just as an attendee, and that's more helpful than not attending at all, of course. And then you can also go to the meetup and be a speaker, and that's even better than being a meetup because obviously then you're visible and you're seen as an expert and stuff like that, or at least you're seen as somebody who's up there participating.
Hmm.
Um, and then in certain ways, even better than that is being the meeting organizer. And a lot of people don't feel like they can step up and do that for whatever reasons, but there's no rule against it. There's nobody saying you can't start one of these meetups or events or something like that. So that's another way to participate. And then there's conferences. I believe, Puneet, there's a Ruby conference happening in India like next month, if I'm not mistaken. Do you know anything about that?
No, Jason. I'm not aware of.
Oh yeah. Yeah, check it out. RubyConf India. I'm Googling it right now. It is happening. Waiting for the site to load. November 29th and 30th. I don't know where this is or how to pronounce it. Jaipur?
Okay, it's in Jaipur. Yes, Jaipur, Rajasthan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, stuff like that, keeping abreast of when those things are happening and stuff like that and attending those. I've found that as I go to these conferences, I go to kind of a lot of conferences. I keep seeing the same people over and over at conferences. And so I've developed kind of a social group. And
Hmm.
those people have helped me. Those people have helped me get jobs and freelance gigs and stuff like that. In fact, I probably see my Ruby conference social group more than I see my local friends who live just a few miles away from me, which is kind
Hmm.
of funny. But that's certainly another way of marketing yourself. And again, you don't have to do every single one of these, but you have to outcompete other developers somehow. And if you're not doing any of these things, you're probably not going to win.
Hmm. Got it.
Let's see. There's even more that can be done. Um, if you want to get really crazy, I keep waiting for somebody else to copy this. Nobody else does. I send a programming newsletter in the mail. Sanjit gets it every month. And the great thing about that is, again, nobody's doing it. And so, talking about competition, I'm automatically in the number one slot just by virtue of the fact that
Yeah.
there's nobody else in the category.
Yep, you know what? It was a novel idea when it started, and it still is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, people are always surprised when they hear that I do it. And sometimes I tell people like, "Hey, give me your mailing address so I can send you this in the mail in your
Hmm.
actual mailbox." Then they give me their email address. And I'm like, "No, no, no, no. I'm talking about your mailbox." And they're like, "Oh, that's crazy." Okay.
Who gets letter in the post these days, isn't it? Yeah, that's what they will ask. Yeah, I know.
Exactly. Yeah, and people love it. And so, Puneeth, if you can think of those things that are really unusual that nobody else is doing,
Hmm.
then, again, kind of the big fish in the small pond kind of idea. With the snail mail newsletter thing, I'm the only fish in that pond. But if you can think of things that very few people are doing, or maybe very few people are doing in your area, like for example, I've started meetups in my local area because I live near a relatively small city, population 200,000, Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's a relatively small city where there's not a huge tech presence. And so I can start a meetup and and have it get traction because there's not a lot of competition. So I don't know if there's something like that, Puneeth, but these are very different ideas. Starting a meetup, sending a snail mail newsletter. Um, there are things you can do that very few other people are doing. So that's something to think about.
Got it, Jason.
Hmm. Um, Anything else, Puneeth?
How did you find your first freelance client, Jason?
That's a great question. Um, how I started, and this is a very common way that people start, is to go back to a past employer and offer to work for them as a freelancer.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I first started, I don't remember if I did exactly this, but one thing you can do is just go back to all your previous employers and just first of all let them know. Again, marketing is letting people know that you exist. Um,
Hmm.
go back to previous employers and just say, "Hey, I'm freelancing now," just so you're aware. And so if you're interested in working together again, but in a different way, I'm available for that now. That obviously is not going to work out all the time, but it works some of the time. And that's the thing with all these things. None of them work all the time, but all of them work some of the time. Um, and then in addition to going back to your past employers, you can go back to people you worked with in the past, and say, "Hey, I'm doing freelancing now." That's what I did when I started consulting. I went back to everybody I know professionally, and just one by one, I like had calls with people and I said, "Hey, let's catch up." And also, just so you know, I'm doing freelancing now.
Hmm.
I'll mention something else beneath. We talked about that famous cricketer, that high status guy who's popular with the ladies. Um, they all know what he looks like. And with me, obviously my camera's turned on right now and you're hearing my voice. And I've put myself out there a lot over the years. People know what I look like, they know what I sound like, they kind of know what I'm like in general. Um, I noticed that you don't have your camera on right now, Puneeth, and that's obviously fine. Um, but hearing somebody's voice and seeing somebody's face, these things like lubricate the gears when it comes to building trust. It's one of these
Hmm.
things that like pushes your psychological buttons. Um, like, I've known our friend Sanjit here for some years at this point. Um, And Sanjit, you and I have conversed, we've seen each other, and we have a much stronger relationship than we would have if we had only ever exchanged emails or something like that. And I think
Totally, totally the case. Yeah.
yeah. Um, and then again, like spending time in person is the number one of them all. And I think the hierarchy goes like being in person together is number one. Next best thing is hearing your voice. Next best thing is seeing you. And then the next best thing is reading something you wrote or exchanging written communication, stuff like that. And so the more that you put yourself out there and you let people actually see you and hear you, and in fact, physically interact with you in the real world, those things those things build trust and help you get hired.
Got it, Jason.
Yeah. Um, and these things, I've been talking about this kind of a lot lately. Um, um, the way that you present yourself matters. Like for me, I have an HD camera. I have this nice high quality microphone. Um, and I have this setting that I've kind of tried to put together deliberately, um, with good lighting and stuff like that. Like I bought specific lights for this setting so that I could try to try to put forth a professional appearance and stuff like that. These things all matter. And so in your case, Puneeth, if you want to get hired and build trust, all those things would help. Um, I can tell that you're maybe using your computer's mic or whatever. If you get a like professional quality microphone and a nice camera, good lighting and a good setting, install all that stuff again greases the wheels and helps build trust.
Yeah, sure, Jason. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're about at time here. So I'll wrap it up pretty soon, but any final thoughts or questions or anything from either of you guys before we go?
Yeah, I think the essence of what you're saying, Jason, is that sometimes we have to put ourselves out there, It will feel uncomfortable. It will feel like, we are sort of exposing ourselves, to the world out there.
Hmm.
But one thought that has helped me always is don't worry about what other people would think, because most of the time other people are worried about what others would think about them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if that helps, Puneet, to make that break and, do something. So, try to do, even if it is a one small thing, that makes you slightly uncomfortable, so to get out of your, what's the word, like that comfort zone, that type of thing.
Got it, Jess. Got it, Sanjit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard this thing. It was like when I was 30, I was worried about what other people thought. Then when I was 40, I didn't give a damn what other people thought. And then when I was 50, I realized nobody ever thinks about me at all.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think that's a good lesson. Um, okay. Well, thanks a lot, guys, for joining me. Thank you, dear viewer, and I'll see you guys next time.
See